My family and I have moved a bajillion times. This is my 11th home studio, which means I've had to set up my home studio in 11 different locations, most of them vastly different from the rest. Some were terrible, some were great. This one's my favorite, and I want to share with you why. But before I do, if you're just thinking about setting up your home studio and you'd like to know my specific gear recommendations of what to get started, and then the things you can wait until later to get, check out my free gear guide at homestudiocorner.com/gear. When it comes to setting up a home studio, the room affects everything. I wish it wasn't so, but it is. I've had my studio in tiny bedroom where I could barely fit all my equipment in the room, and I've had big spacious rooms like this one, which is above the garage at my house. This room is 20 feet by about 21, which is close to square, but it's actually not a big deal. The size of the room tends to help. I can't exactly explain why, but I found that the bigger the room, the easier it is to get things sounding pretty good. I want to say it has to do with the dimensions of the room and which frequencies resonate at which dimensions. The bigger the room, the lower the frequency, which means a lot of those problem areas that happen in a small space don't happen as much, or at least they happen at a lower frequency in a larger space. Think about a bathroom stall. Maybe I'm the only one who does this, but if you're in a public bathroom stall and you hum, I hum a lot, then usually there's a certain note, and this one note resonates more. That's a tiny little space, so that note is fairly high. If your studio is really small, then all those higher frequencies are going to mess with each other. It's going to be hard to hear things accurately. So as we expand the size of our studio, we lower the frequency of a lot of those resonant problems, which means the low frequencies can sometimes still be problematic, but typically a lot of those kind of mid-range frequencies that are really annoying and show up in the recordings and in the mixes, those tend to get pushed lower and farther away. I remember when I was first getting into audio, I would spend a lot of time on forums, and it seemed like the answer to everything was acoustic treatment. What microphone should I use? Doesn't matter, get acoustic treatment. Okay, that's ridiculous, but I will say DIY acoustic treatment works great. I love the professionally produced acoustic treatment, but about 10 years ago, I had a guy here in Nashville just build me a bunch of panels. So big, tall, 7-foot by 3-foot gobos that were on wheels that I could roll around the studio. Those stay to the left and right of mix position. And then a bunch of 4-foot by 2-foot or so panels with fiberglass insulation in the middle, covered with just black cloth, and I kind of place those around the room. Between that and carpet, I find that I get plenty of absorption, and it tames down a lot of those kind of echoey, slappy frequencies that happen when you go into a room and clap and you hear that. Getting some absorption up in places helps get rid of that, which is a good first step towards treating your room. I've also got a few bass traps made by the same person. I just keep those in the corner behind the mix position, leaning against the wall. It creates a space that apparently traps the high frequencies or does something to them so that I get a pretty even low frequency response in the room. But again, since the room's so big, that helps. Now, you may not have a large room. Totally fine. This is more just advice for if you have the choice between a smaller and a larger room, and you can do the larger room without getting divorced, I would say go for the larger room. It's just going to inherently have fewer sonic problems. When it comes to setting up a studio, form and function matter. There will always be compromises when you're setting up a home studio. For me, I've made some compromises in terms of placement of mix position that I'm 100% okay with, but they do go against conventional wisdom of setting up a studio. So typically, if you have a rectangular room, the idea is it's best to put the mix position on one end of that room, on one of the shorter walls, with the speakers firing down the length of the room. In this studio, while it is technically rectangular, it's almost square, but this wall behind me is the longest wall of the room, but it's where I've placed my mix position. Why? The answer might surprise you. It's because this looks better on camera than this. So if I go this way, there's an air conditioner unit and a window on this wall. I'm over the garage, and there is a stairway and a door to the attic on the other end. Neither of those are very attractive. I don't want to block the window. I don't want to block the air conditioner. Also, when I'm sitting at my desk and the camera is at me, which is like most of my videos, I want the behind me to look cool. I didn't really want there to be a stairway and a random weird-looking hobbit door to the attic. I much prefer the look that I have now, which is these angled ceilings with shelves and stuff behind them, I think that looks more appealing. So I made the executive decision that's more functional and has a better look to it. So form and function kind of trumped what is the proper way to set things up. The other thing you may have noticed just in the last couple of months is my mix position is not in the center of the room. That's another common practice. You should have your speakers centered between the two side walls. Well, I'm a dad and I've got 3 kids. And our house isn't massive, and we wanted a place for, especially my teenager, to be able to come hang out with his friends, play video games, and all of that. My studio is massive. I don't need all whatever 400 square feet. So we slid everything in my studio over. I'm not right up against the wall, but I'm much closer to that wall than I am that wall. And guess what? With a little bit of treatment, it sounds fine. I haven't noticed any big difference, and it's allowed for us to have another part of the room for a different function. One other thing that I love about the studio, you may recall 2 studios ago, I was also in a house above the garage with sloped ceilings. It was actually 4 houses down, which is another story. But that house didn't have a door at the bottom of the stairs. So we installed a door, but it had a gap like that at the bottom, and I could hear everything that was happening in the kitchen downstairs, which was super annoying when I was shooting a video or a podcast or recording music because I could hear literally everything. Now, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to having extra sounds in the recording. If there's a lawnmower outside, if there's rain happening, I'm okay with let's just let it be. But at some point, that got really annoying. I felt like I was literally in the kitchen. In this studio, for whatever reason, the door that came with the house is super tight. It locks in and goes kind of when it closes, and I almost can't hear anything happening down there. If you can work that out in your space, if you've got a space that's a little bit isolated from everybody else, that's great. If it's still picking up a lot of sound from everywhere else, the door is the place where I would look. Can you put in a different door or add in something along the bottom and maybe even around the sides that helps seal the door a little bit more? It makes a huge difference. Final piece of advice, drive your gear into the ground. You can't see it, but out that window, there's a beat up old minivan. We've had it for about 10 years. It was pretty new when we got it. It is beat to crap now, and I'm okay with it because we're not carrying a car note, and we're going to ride that sucker until it dies, and then we'll get a new one. I could get a new car every 2 years, but who wants to spend all that money? If you do, great, go for it, all that. But for me, in the studio, I'm kind of the same way. I've had that keyboard for like 8 years. I've had this mixer for 7 years. I used the same computer for many, many years until the face of it fell off. So I like the idea of, especially when it comes to just the technical tools of getting the job done, interface, computer, key controller, even microphones. I'm not all that interested in buying and collecting more and more and more. What I do like to buy is creative equipment. So I bought a Helix last year, and that's been really fun to get new guitar tones with that I couldn't get before. I bought a new guitar last year, which sounds different and gets me excited to write different styles of music. Virtual instruments with different sounds and patches, that kind of stuff, I'm much more interested in getting than a slightly better microphone or a slightly... Fun fact, this microphone here, it's a $129 PreSonus microphone. I also used to use one that was like 5 times the price. And no matter which microphone I use, people would ask me, man, what is that microphone? It sounds so good. If the only consistent thing between those was me, and it was the same preamp, same board, and everything else, then that means the microphone didn't make as big of a difference as we like to think it does. I know that's not popular theology when it comes to making music, but it's true. Great gear is wonderful. If you want to go buy it, go buy it. But if you find yourself buying new equipment after new equipment after new equipment and not releasing something every time you buy something, that's a good maybe habit to pick up. Before you buy that new thing, why don't you release some music with the last thing you bought? That's what I've been doing. It's been working well, and I'm really happy with the kind of the piece that I've made with new equipment. I'll get new stuff, but I'm not beholden to it, and I'm much more interested in making new music than just acquiring more stuff. There are probably 2 reactions to when people see my studio. Either, holy crap, that's really fancy, I could never have all that, or, boy, my studio's nicer than that. That's weird. And there's room for both, but the point that I want to get across to you is you can make great sounding music in a home studio. You don't need tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. You can use just a handful of tools to get the job done. So, for example, I have a decent amount of equipment. I've got some really nice rack-mounted gear here. If I got a call from the Grammy committee tomorrow and they said, we're giving you a Grammy for the latest Stare Down album, when I go to give my acceptance speech, it's not going to be, boy, I'm really glad I used that outboard preamp. That really made the record. No, it would have been a great record probably without it. But what I would think about are the people that were involved, right? The process of creating it, not so much the tools that were used. So don't bow down at the altar of the tools. Make music the focus and you'll be in good shape. If you're just starting out and you want to know my recommendations of pieces of gear to start, you don't need all this to begin. You can start small and grow as you grow and learn how to do this whole home recording and production process. If you want to see my gear guide, you can have it for free. Just go to homestudiocorner.com/gear, enter your email address. I will send it to you, and happy recording.